What is the most striking about these current events is just how predictable this whole situation is and how unsurprising it is. The protests, the destruction, and the response, or much more accurately, the lack of any response from the government. From Minnesota to Texas, it's all the exact same situation. People are using one man's life being ended as an excuse to enrich themselves and to take out their violent frustration on society. This obviously is what's happening, despite the constant leftist equivocation and apologetics. They aren't doing this because of some sort of outrage about what happened to one guy. They aren't doing this because of some sort of outrage at what America has been, or what they think America has been doing to them for their whole lives. They're doing this because it's pretty cool to get a new TV or Lego set, and because of the quite natural enjoyment that men get out of destroying stuff. As Moldbug once said, "Fire is cool," said Beavis. "Fire is indeed cool. Americans were bored and needed some better CNN. They wanted to see stuff burn. Stuff indeed burned, and is still burning, which was cool. So they got what they wanted. Not too different from the crowd in the Colosseum, just less honest about how they satisfy their very simple human needs. After all, since we've all been locked up for a couple of months, it probably is especially cool to see stuff burn. But this desire is also, of course, totally antithetical to any civilized society. Maybe making other places burn isn't. However, you won't have a civilization for very long if it's your own place that you're burning, and you're doing it over and over again. It's not the fact of the damage that is so important about these events. Sure, this will probably cause the most damage that any protest has caused since LA 30 years ago. But all societies have things get out of hand from time to time. What's really important here, what's so striking about all these events, is the fact that no one really is that surprised that any of this is happening. This could all so easily be put down if the government just wanted to apply the necessary force, and that necessary force isn't even particularly extreme. The National Guard could just march into these cities, go to the hotspots, tell them to stop, and they will stop. This whole fraud would be over, and we could at least go back to an orderly degeneration of civilization. This whole situation is really emblematic of most of the big problems that the West faces today. The mass immigration, the destruction of the family, the social degeneration, government, society. We could very easily stamp down on these things, revert course almost immediately, if they wanted to. We could just say no thanks to new migrants, but our government, and much more importantly, those who control the conversation, say that they want more. The people say no, the cathedral says yes, and what a surprise, who wins? The whole narrative that ostensibly started this was a media invention in the first place, an invention used to push the cathedral's view. I'm not saying that the incident in question wasn't bad. It probably was, and the cop probably should go to jail. However, the spotlight that was put on it, the focus that it's been given, that is all an invention by the media. They can tell just about any story that they want to. There have been many similar stories involving white people which got only a tiny fraction of the attention because it didn't push the narrative that they wanted. If they wanted, the media could make us believe that there was some mass epidemic of Hispanic on Asian attacks, if they highlighted every single one of those stories and ignored every single other story. That sounds absurd, probably, but it really would be quite easy. All it would take is, say, one incident a month, and bam, you got your narrative. It's obvious that the reason that they choose to focus on these particular incidents is because they are white on black, whether the actual badness of these incidents is real or imagined. It is, of course, true that African Americans proportionally have this happen to them much more commonly than other groups, but that again just shows how blatant the manipulation from the media is. When it suits them, they'll say stuff like the majority of prisoners are white, which is true, though there is a very disproportionate amount of prisoners which are African American. And when it suits them, they'll say that there's a disproportionate amount of black people who have their lives ended by police, which is also true, but the majority are white. They choose proportionality when it benefits their narrative, and they choose raw numbers when it benefits their narrative. Pointing out such glaring hypocrisy almost feels pointless. However, it really is important to understand the way that the media presents this information, because once you do that, then you're able to deconstruct the narratives that they push. You're able to understand how they're trying to program you and how you're able to break out of that. Despite how easy it would be to put a stop to all the damage, to all the things that are going on now, the government just refuses to end it. A government which refuses to put an end to such a simple situation is simply a government which does not deserve to exist. The monopoly on force is the absolute most basic requirement for a functioning government. Every other good work that a government does requires on this first, the force, to be able to accomplish those good things. And we know that these sorts of protests will happen again and again. Police chiefs and mayors literally saying that they won't prevent this chaos could be the catchphrase for the end of a civilization. With every successive time, these events will become more and more predictable, as if that's even possible at this point. Whatever little bit of surprise you might still have will be gone in a decade or two when this continues to happen. This whole situation also comes back to another classic liberal mind trap. Don't you know, they always say, when the government enforces its authority on an unruly population, that only leads to more unrest, to things just getting worse. People feel like they're being unheard, they feel like they're being oppressed, and the force just causes them to lash out even more. To cite Moldbug once more, this is just wrong. The line of thinking, in large part at least, comes from the American Rebellion, where the Whigs said we just need to be nice and reasonable to the colonists, and the Tories said we need to be harsh with them. And the Americans ended up leaving, so I guess that means that the Whigs must have been right after all. This totally ignores the fact that the British did try to be nice to them, and the Whigs never cared much about retaining the colonies anyways, and neither do the Whigs of today. The left care about retaining order. So it shouldn't be much of a shock that the left and the Whigs, which are obviously one and the same, both suggest the course of action which leads to the Tories losing everything that they wanted. What leads to unrest and conflict is not the lack of peaceful debate. It's not the lack of people trying to be reasonable and nice. It's the lack of an effective government to prevent this unrest to occur in the first place. It was the same in the USSR. It's the same everywhere. This unrest happens because either resources are limited or the will of the government is limited, not because there's some sort of mystical lack of cooperation going on. Tory, Whig, or whatever, if the government cannot maintain its monopoly on force, we will all end up hurt. The CNN picture is particularly poetic. If you aren't 100% on their side, if you're only 95% of the way there, then you can expect the same thing to happen to you. Thanks for watching. Please donate to my Subscribestar if you enjoy this content. And also, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and most importantly, please share these videos with anyone who you think might find it interesting. Growing on YouTube's pretty hard, especially political YouTube, so it's really helpful if you can share these videos with anyone who you think will enjoy them. This isn't the video I was originally going to make next, but this whole topic has been so huge, I think I really needed to comment on it in some way or another. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to my donors, Emmett Vestry, Seth Apex, and Quo Pregranator. Thank you everyone again, and goodbye.